Hey y'all, my name is Babbles, and welcome to the last Building Tales video of the year. And this marks the end of my first calendar year on YouTube. It's not my anniversary yet, but end of the year. Pretty nice. So I decided for this video, I wanted to do a little bit of a year in review. Just kind of quickly go through all my builds and maybe mention something I learned while I was building them. So let's get started. So the first story I built from was Cinderella, and I built this tree based on the French version of that. It's a pretty old version, and in it, this is, I believe, an ash tree. So this was my very first build, and I'm still pretty proud of it. I do think it's a little boxy, but at this point, I did not have much experience building trees at all, so I think it turned out pretty well. Moving on to my next build, this is also from Cinderella, but from the Thrace version, which is possibly the oldest version we have of this story. So I built this based on what I think houses back then would look like, and I added a little living area, a few rooms. At this point, I wasn't really used to building something that someone could live in, so this was really good practice for that. Now, this was inspired by the Vietnamese version of Cinderella, Tam and Sam. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that right. But this is a palace inspired by Vietnamese architecture, and it's very simple, but also at the time, this was the biggest and most detailed thing I had ever built. But I do want to mention something. At the time that I was building these last three builds, I was using Lightmatica, meaning I could take a whole lot of time working on details and shapes and things, and then just paste the schematic here and build it from there. I have since stopped using Lightmatica because I realized if I'm doing everything off camera, and my goal is to show my learning process, I'm not showing the learning process. That's kind of counter to my whole thing here. So while I do like this build a lot, and I'm very proud of it, I am glad that I've kind of changed how I make my videos. Moving on to the next story, we have the Odyssey, where I built my very first ship. This was the very first time I'd ever built a ship, and so the learning curve was interesting. And speaking of curves, I remember this particular curve gave me a lot of trouble because Grecian ships have this kind of curve at the back, and I really struggled to get it looking nice. And then it was my first time building sails, and then I wanted to add some detail at the front, but at this scale it was kind of tricky, but I think it turned out okay. And then I built Charybdis. This was my first attempt at an organic, and I'm still really proud of it. I used the glass to make the waves to make it seem like she was creating a whirlpool, and then I have her in the middle here with some teeth and things. And oh, looking at this, I'm still really proud of myself. And then here we have Skyla, who I actually built out of dirt first so I could make sure I got the shape that I wanted, and then I went back in with the other materials and picked colors and things. And I still think that's a pretty good way to build organics. And I know there are some things that I would do differently in this, like I would maybe put a little more effort into her face, but for the very limited experience I had, I think this turned out pretty well. And then I built Baba Yaga's house, which was my first time both combining organics and regular builds, and my first time building on a diagonal. I wanted to build on a diagonal because the legs would be easier if I went diagonally, and also because it was something I had never done before, so I thought it might be a good thing to practice. So here we've got the inside, and it's very simple, but I was trying something wildly different from anything I'd done before, so I wanted to keep the base elements of it pretty simple. And then I've got a little bit of a forest. I do think I've improved. I do think these trees are an improvement from my first one. They are a different type of tree. They are pines, which are a lot more straight than the ash tree that I was building, but I like them a lot. And then I wanted it to seem like some of them had fallen over, maybe the grass had died while the house was sitting down. All in all, I think this is pretty good. Next up, we've got Dracula's Castle, which is kind of basic for a castle, but once again, I was combining different elements. This was my first time combining shapes like this. I did a lot of terraforming in the back. Yeah, I do think I could have done the texturing a bit better, but for the time, is what I could do. So yeah, I terraformed the cliff. I've got cylinders, I've got boxes. The interior is not done, and there's a wolf in there, but but I still kind of like it. Next up, we have the first requested build that I made, and it is the King Under the Mountains lair. So here I've got Smaug in his hoard with all his gold and his jewels and things. And then I've got kind of the remnants of the previous dwarven settlement, or mine, or whatever you would call it. And I like this a lot. I really love those stories, so it was really cool getting to build from it. So I've got the broken down remains, I've got the organic made out of netherrack with some candles for the horns. Yeah, I like this. Next, we have the Nautilus from 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, which was another request. And for this one, I really tried to flex my creative muscles when it came to quote unquote building blocks, like the crafters and the furnaces and that. I wanted it to look really mechanical, but also like it maybe could be confused for something that was alive, which is what the Nautilus was like in the book. So, yeah, I had never built anything this technical, I guess you could call it. So, this was a really fun challenge. And then we have Avengers Tower, which was the third request of this year. And I really enjoy this build. I like the multiple levels. I like how you can kind of see through it because the building is basically just glass. I like that it's a bunch of weird shapes put together. It was definitely a really tricky thing to figure out, but I had fun. And last but not least, we've got the old Granville house from It's a Wonderful Life. This is the first time that I've ever built in grayscale, so it was really fun trying to figure it out. This is definitely a simplified version of the old Granville house, but I really wanted to do it because it's one of my absolute favorite Christmas movies, and I've noticed it's been getting a lot of love on the internet lately, so good for that. And that's it. Those are all of my Building Tales builds from this year. It's definitely been a year of learning, and I cannot wait to learn more in 2025. So, as always, leave a like if you like, subscribe if you so choose, comment down below what stories you'd like me to take a look at in the future, and don't forget to check out a book from your local library. See y'all!